Добрый день.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear guests. Today is the 16th of March, 2022. It is 4 p.m. Moscow time. We are beginning the session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of the dissertation by Elena Starovoitova. The dissertation is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of Historical Sciences, Scientific Specialty 562, General History. The topic of the dissertation is Sino-Russian relations in 1894, 1905 and their reflection in Russian satirical graphics. Under the order issued by the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University on the 28th of December 2021, I, Professor Vladimir Kolotov, Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University, have been appointed the Chairperson of the Dissertation Council. The other members of the Dissertation Council have been appointed by the same order. They are Nikolai Dyakov, Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University. Alexander Starozhuk, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University. Yulia Blagoder, Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor of the Kuban State Technological University. One member of the Dissertation Council is participating in the session online. This is Rostislav Berezkin from Fudan University, China. Professor Berezkin, can you hear us and see us? Yes, I can hear you and see you. The candidate for the degree, Elena Starovoitova, is also here. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. The research supervisor, Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University, Nikolai Samoilov, is also here. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council who are participating in the session online to switch off their microphones. Please make sure that your microphone is switched on when you are given the floor. The session of the Dissertation Council is being recorded and broadcast on the official website of St. Petersburg State University, and it is also being interpreted into English. You can ask questions and make comments about the dissertation using the email address that you can find on the official website of St. Petersburg State University. You can ask questions about the dissertation or about the presentation. This will allow you to participate in the academic discussion. The technical personnel will refer the questions to me, and I will read them out during the discussion. The questions are supposed to be relevant to the contents of the dissertation. The authors of the questions are to write down their name, position, and workplace. The questions that are not relevant to the contents of the dissertation and anonymous questions will not be read out. Under the order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, issued by St. Petersburg State University, this session of the Dissertation Council is duly constituted, provided at least 2/3 of the members of the Dissertation Council are present. The total number is not to be fewer than 4 people. This Dissertation Council consists of 5 people, 5 of which are present, including 1 member of the Dissertation Council who is participating in the session online. Therefore, we have a quorum. I would like to ask the representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management to make an attendance list. The agenda is as follows. The session will last for about 2 hours. Number 1. The chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the academic degree seeker and their conformity with the requirements. Replies to questions, if any, about 5 minutes. Number 2. The degree seeker's presentation providing an overview and findings of the research. About 15 minutes. Number 3. Questions to the degree seeker regarding the presentation. No more than 2 minutes for each question. Number 4. Replies to the questions. No more than 5 minutes. Number 5. External reports on the dissertation. Number 6. The council members will be taking the floor in turns. They will be reading out their reports. Number 7. The chairman's report on the dissertation, about 10 minutes. Number 8. The academic degree seekers' comments about the reports on the dissertation and replies to the questions, no more than 20 minutes. Number 9. Open discussion. The floor will be given to the members of the audience. They can give a brief account of their ideas and ask questions about the research. No more than 2 minutes per person. It is necessary to fill in the registration form and give their full name before the talk. Number 10. The chairperson will read out the questions received via email. Please note that questions which take more than 2 minutes to read will not be read out. Number 11. Replies to the questions. No more than 2 minutes per question. Number 12. Presentation of the dissertation supervisor. Number 13. Deliberations of the members of the Dissertation Council before the open balloting on conferring or non-conferring the academic degree. The discussion of the results is not broadcast. Number 14. Open balloting, vote counting and recording the results in the protocol. Number 15. Making a decision on whether to confer or not to confer the academic degree. And number 16. The academic degree seeker's closing speech, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections to the agenda? There are no questions or objections, therefore I would like to proceed with the agenda. Please leave your telephones set on silent mode. The council members participating in this session online are advised not to switch off their mobile phones so that we can contact you in case of a technical failure. Now I would like to proceed with the agenda. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of Historical Sciences, Scientific Specialty 562, General 6 History. The topic of the dissertation is Sino-Russian relations in 1894-1905 and their reflection in the Russian satirical graphics. The dissertation was approved for the defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The dissertation was completed in St. Petersburg State University. The dissertation supervisor is Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University, Nikolai Samoilov. The academic degree seeker has published 10 research papers. 6 papers have been published in peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science. 4 papers have been published in journals indexed in Web of Science and Scopus. The degree seeker has submitted a full set of documents to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management has the copies of the documents. Before giving the floor to the degree seeker, I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council if they have any questions to the academic degree seeker, and if it is necessary to read out the list of documents. There are no questions. So I give the floor to Elena Starovoitova. Good afternoon, dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear colleagues. I would like to tell you about my research findings. Nowadays, China plays an important role in the world community, and it is of special interest to Russia, as both countries experience pressure from the outside. Therefore, their partnership is so instrumental. We witnessed a similar situation at the turn of the 20th century, when the Russian Empire started to pursue an active policy in the Far East. Starting from the second half of the 19th century, we saw the change in the international environment. Therefore, the Russian Empire showed an increased interest to the Sin Empire. Since 1890, China and Chinese people became a common topic for satirical graphics. The object of the research is Russian-Chinese relations between 1894-1905. The lower limit is related to the Japanese-Chinese War, which demonstrated that China was quite weak at the time, and the upper limit, the upper time period, is connected with the Russian-Japanese War of 1904-1905. After that, we saw the change, radical change in the relations between China and Russia, from close cooperation to confrontation. The subject of the dissertation is the specific features of Russian-Chinese relations. In my research, I used different methods, including such methods as analysis, synthesis, comparison, and description. To analyze the satirical graphics, I used the methods suggested by Professor Golikov, Professor Rybachenko, Professor Rosomahin, and other authors. It was important for me to take into account such factors as time, the ideological position of the author and of the journal, the image of the characters, their clothes and gestures. The aim of the dissertation is to create a full image of Russian-Chinese relations in 1894, between 1894-1905. I used different resources which are stored in the archive. Besides, I used different special documents which are published in Russian and in English. I analyzed the magazine, the Alarm Clock, which is a democratic magazine. It was published in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. And I also analyzed some other magazines as well. When it comes to prior research of the topic, I would like to say that there are many papers related to this topic. I'm not going to focus on this issue as I have my time limits. You can see the main types of research papers that I used in my dissertation. The scientific novelty of the research is connected with the fact that I introduced into academic discourse such sources as Russian satirical graphics. The main research findings to be defended are shown on the next slide. They are Russian magazines published extensively about Russia and China due to the geopolitical situation. And they focused on the following topics: Japanese-Chinese War, signing of contracts between Russia and China, the Boxer Rebellion, and Russian and Japanese War. In general, I can say that between 1904 and 1905, Russian satirical graphics created an image of a Chinese person which caused different types of reactions from the readers. The dissertation consists of an introduction, 3 chapters, conclusion, and a list of references. The first chapter of the dissertation deals with the main events and different matters which are important for Russian-Chinese relations. The second chapter deals with the coverage of the Chinese topic in Russian satirical graphics. I would like to say that the journals focused on different issues. The confrontation between Japan and China was regarded as a confrontation which was limited to Russia. The characters in the graphic were shown from a bad perspective. They were shown as stupid people wearing national costumes. The participants of the conflict were also shown from the point of view of England, which was sort of looking at the conflict from the outside. And the question arose, when did the portrayal of Japan and China changed? So here you can see that the emperor here is pushing away the monument of China. This satirical graphic shows that here China is shown as something solid, something unchangeable, and something which is a relic of the past. Some satirical graphics described the peaceful agreement between China and Japan, and the beneficiary was England, as we see from the satirical graphics. After Japan and Chinese War, we saw increased cooperation between Russia and China. For example, we saw the opening of a Russian-Chinese bank in 1896. However, there was no information about the contract, the secret contract, which was signed between China and Russia in 1896. The satirical graphics also described Li Hunjan traveling to the west and the satirical graphics emphasized that China was not a modern country. However, China was described as something bigger, which emphasized that the country had covert potential. And the satirical graphics also described Chinese and German relations. However, they emphasized that these relations were not equal. Some satirical graphics were also important for showing the colonial division of China. However, China was not described as a single victim here. So, another important topic for the Russian satirical graphics was the necessity to modernize China, and Russian public regarded China as a mirror of their internal problems. And there were doubts about the necessity to modernize China according to the Western pattern. However, modern Chinese cities were shown as Russian cities, or they resembled Russian cities a lot. So in general, the caricaturists made fun of the long process of modernization of China. The authors of Russian satirical graphics knew a lot about Chinese traditional costumes, Chinese food, Chinese names, which shows that there was an increased interest to China among Russians. Journalists felt that China was important for Russia's foreign policy, and they also were able to identify some positive characteristics of Russian-Chinese relations. The alarm clock, the magazine alarm clock, for example, showed the satirical graphic mass of the 21st century. However, another magazine mentions a new patriotic movement in China. The Russian satirical graphics also showed the invasion of Russian troops in China. For example, here we can see a Russian Cossack who is facing the dragon, which is China. Then we saw the change in the Russian satirical magazines. According to the new point of view, Russian troops were supposed to combat, to fight China, and Russian troops were the only force that were able to do so. There were other satirical graphics which showed empathy to China, and it's no wonder. Russia believed that European countries and Japan were the reason of Chinese turmoil. So in one satirical graphic we see two Chinese officials which are showing which are showing as someone who have no other idea but to accept the peaceful agreement. Another section of my dissertation describes the interest to China between 1904 and 1905. Russian-Japanese War changed the attitude to China, and Japan was shown as something evil. However, China was also an important topic for satirical graphics because some hostilities took place on its territory. However, China was shown as a big and wise official, while Japan was shown as a small man in a military uniform. In all satirical graphics, we see that Russian journalists were hoping that Chinese would remain neutral. It was emphasized that China did not want to help Japan and that it was following the norms of the international law. And at the same time, Manchuria was shown as something, as a cow which did not want to follow the Japanese snake. In 1905, the journalists were not sure of Chinese neutrality. After the war was finished and during the peace talks, journalists showed empathy to China, which was which was declared to be the main victim after the war. Probably journalists didn't want to emphasize the situation inside the country. So, Russian satirical graphics between 1894 and 1905 depicted China quite often, and the assessment could be controversial. Russian satirical graphics showed a specific image of China which was widely recognized. China was described as a grand official, or as a common peasant, or a dragon. The facial features could provoke different reactions from the reader. It is connected with the fact that the attitude to China was varied. The image of China was influenced by the satirical tradition of the West. And after the revolution of 1917, China was still depicted as the Sin Empire. Moreover, Soviet painters emphasized the fact that China was supposed to develop relations with the Soviet Union. So we see that the image which was formed before the beginning of the 20th century remained in the Soviet period. About 100 years ago, China was, or rather Russia was, following China with interest, and they were trying to answer the question about the future of Russian-Chinese relations. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, do you have any questions about the presentation? No questions. Since there are no questions, I would like to say that you can answer the questions after each report has been read out, as it seems quite logical. Now I would like to read out the external reports. One of them is from Professor Saginadze, and another external report was written by Professor Victoria Sharonova. So the report by Professor Ella Saginadze. Elena Starovoitova has chosen a very topical issue for her dissertation. The image of peoples and the perception of this image by people of another country is a very interesting topic. The object of research is the image of China, and this is the country which had a long border with Russia. The Russian Empire was closely following China at the end of the 19th century. The analysis in the dissertation is well structured. The degree seeker provides an overview of different papers, including papers written in Chinese. She also gives a critical analysis of different research papers. This allows her to produce a dissertation which has scientific novelty. She also compares the perception of two cultures. This shows that she is familiar with different scholarly papers. It's common knowledge that people belonging to different ethnic backgrounds are different in their traditions, cultures, and mentality. And people expect specific behavior, they have specific stereotypes about other people, about other nationalities. Satirical graphics provides a specific description of events and interpretation of events. This allows to spread the image and make it more common. Besides, this makes the satirical graphics a very emotional form of journalism. The candidate for the degree analyzes different satirical papers, including the alarm clock, the dragonfly, and some others. And the research findings are credible and valid. The academic degree seeker gives a list of topics which were common for Russian satirical graphics. She uses a number of methods in her dissertation. This allowed Elena Starovoitova to identify the relevant sources. She describes the object and the subject of the dissertation, and she sets a number of tasks. The dissertation is logically written, and it is well structured, and it complies with the major requirements. The dissertation is written on an interdisciplinary topic, and what I like about the dissertation is that the image of China and the Chinese is compared with the image of other Asian countries. However, I suppose you should have provided a more detailed analysis of Russian Orientalism at the turn of the century. Besides, I suppose you could have described the image of China as shown in satirical papers of other countries, such as the USA, for example. This comparison would have allowed you to put the research in a broader context and to identify if public sentiments in Russia were similar to those in other countries. However, my critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. These are rather questions than critical remarks. the dissertation has a scientific novelty. This is an independent and original research. The topic of the dissertation is relevant. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian relations in 1894-1905 and their reflection in Russian satirical graphics, comply with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order, and Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of historical sciences, scientific specialty 562, general history. You can answer the questions. I would like to say that I agree with the critical remarks. However, I would like to say a few words about Russian Orientalism. Today, there are lots of papers about this topic. One of them is a monograph by Professor Lukin. The bear is watching the dragon. Some other authors also wrote on this topic. Unfortunately, one of the most distinguished scholars passed away yesterday. I didn't focus on Russian Orientalism in my dissertation as I was limited by the volume of the dissertation. When it comes to comparison with the foreign satirical graphics, I believe I could have included this comparison in my dissertation. However, the task is not as easy as it seems. I did not have access to Western satirical graphics. Besides, they are quite well known. You can find them on the internet, and our students can attend lectures which are devoted to this topic. So I wanted the topic of my dissertation and my material to be unique. And I emphasized in my dissertation that the graphic and satirical tactics were borrowed from the Western journalists. However, the specifics of satirical graphics was connected with the Russian-Chinese relations. For example, there is no empathy to China in Japanese and in Western satirical graphics. So that's probably a topic for future research. Now I would like to read out the report by Victoria Sharonova. The topic of the dissertation is relevant. Russian-Chinese relations have always been important for international stability. Russia and China have always wanted to develop partnership in order to counteract pressure from world powers. The study of Russian-Chinese relations is very important for foreign policy. Foreign policy of the Russian Empire in the Far East is important because when Nicholas II came to power, China was regarded as our partner. So the topic of the dissertation is relevant. I would like also to say that the dissertation has the subject of the research, the object of the research, the tasks and so on, and they are well and logically written. The structure of the dissertation reflects the logics of the research and allows the academic degree seeker to complete all the tasks. Moreover, this is a comprehensive research. The scope of the dissertation is also in line with the topic of the dissertation, and the academic degree seeker provides rationale for her scientific methods. The academic degree seeker analyzes the existing scholarly papers. She describes the contribution of different scholars. She also pinpoints the conceptual drawbacks and issues that have not been resolved. The sources that are used in the dissertation are numerous and varied. She draws upon different magazines and archives, as well as scholarly papers published in Russia, in Europe, and in China. This allows the academic degree seeker to provide rationale for her research findings. She draws upon the works by Мясников, Samoilov, Voskresensky, and others. She also provides the social background for Russian-Chinese relations and explains why there was interest in magazines to China. The academic degree seeker emphasizes that the visual perception of the information about China was important for the readers, since this allowed the journalists to describe the relevant problems. What is also important is that she makes an important contribution to the history of China-Russian relations. She writes about visual anthropology, which is an important part of historical studies. Elena Starovoitova writes about the history of Russian and Chinese relations. However, the work is unique in that she focuses on different types of sources, including Chinese sources. The interpretation provided by Chinese scholars is very important. Sometimes Chinese scholars describe Russia as a colonizer. Therefore, the analytical review made by Elena Starovoitova provides a comprehensive analysis of Russian-Chinese relations during the above-mentioned period. Another chapter of the dissertation describes this Russian satirical graphics. She analyzes the most popular magazines. It is worth mentioning that Russia saw an increased interest to China among Russian people. During that time, we saw migration to the Far East, and that is why many newspapers and magazines focused on Russian-Chinese relations. The degree seeker was able to show how Russian satirical graphics formed the image of China and a Chinese person among Russian people. She showed how international events were reflected in Russian satirical graphics. In the conclusion to her dissertation, she provides the main research findings, which are credible and valid. The credibility is due to the use of lots of different sources and a comprehensive analysis. However, the dissertation has some minor drawbacks. There are 2 misprints, and there are no graphics from the Russian papers published in the Far East. However, the critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. The dissertation makes a contribution to general history. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian relations in 1894-1905 and their reflection in the Russian satirical graphics, complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order. And Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of historical sciences. You can answer the questions. Thank you very much. Yes, there are some misprints in my dissertation, and it's my fault. When I'm writing a monograph based on the dissertation, I will proofread it and edit it again. As for the newspapers published in the Russian Far East, I would like to say that it would be interesting to analyze them as well. However, sometimes the newspapers, the above-mentioned newspapers, do not fall into the time limits, into the time period. Besides, I would like to say that Moscow newspapers and Moscow magazines played a major role in creating a specific perception of China and Chinese people. And newspapers of the Far East received their news from Moscow news agents. However, it would be interesting to analyze this material as well. Thank you. Now I will be giving the floor to the members of the Dissertation Council. The reports have been published on the official website of St. Petersburg State University. Therefore, I would like to ask you to read out only the most relevant parts of your reports, questions and critical remarks. Do you have any objections? Now I give the floor to the first presenter. I give the floor to Professor Nikolai Dyakov. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the academic degree seeker and her dissertation supervisor for this interesting and relevant topic. Elena Starovoitova has already spoken about the novelty of her dissertation. She also has spoken about the relevance and practical significance of the dissertation. I was recommended to focus on the most relevant parts of the report, so I am not going to read out the formal part of my report. In general, the dissertation complies with the requirements. And I believe that the dissertation is well written, and I was impressed by the number of papers that you have published. Including the papers that you have found, that you have published in the journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science. You also give a very logical analysis, and I agree with the research findings. The second half of the 19th century saw that the Far East and China became a place of interest for leading colonial powers. and sometimes third parties were involved in Russian-Chinese relations. This fact reflects the processes that were happening in the history of China and Russian-Chinese relations over the next decades. And I would like to say that it reminds me of the recent situation. Here we see lots of powers which are developing what we can call modern Chinese policy. Since the end of the 19th century, we have seen the rapid development of Russian-Chinese relations. This is connected with new channels of communication. Over the next few decades, we saw that new forms of communication were developed. At the turn of the 21st century, we have an opportunity to develop new types of bilateral relations. We also saw the transformation of the perception of mutual perception between Russia and China. And this perception pertains different levels, including intergovernmental relations and daily relations. The industrial development of the 19th century also brought the development of newspapers and magazines. This was a characteristic feature at the turn of the 20th century. Elena Starovoitova also emphasizes that China and political events related to China were often described by Russian newspapers and magazines. Elena Starovoitova describes the major magazines in her dissertation. And I would like to say that you should draw upon other sources as well. Probably you should draw upon the sources which describe the geopolitical situation at the turn of the 20th century in general. For example, you can find this information in the Eastern reading rooms of the Russian Academy of Science. Some of these newspapers have satirical graphics as well. And I would like to say that this would give you an opportunity to provide more insight into the topic. I would like also to say that the research findings are well written. So I would like to focus on some debatable points in the dissertation. I would like to say that the dissertation has some misprints, unfortunate misprints, and stylistic inaccuracies. I would like to say that the increased interest to China among Russians is reflected in newspapers and magazines. I would like to emphasize that At the turn of the 20th century, Russia saw a rapid development of Russian-Chinese relations. And I read some papers about the perception of different Asian countries to the geopolitical situation in the East. And the perception was that Asian civilization was better than Western civilization. And the dissertation would have been even better if Elena Starovoitova would have compared the satirical image of the Sin Empire with the image of other Oriental countries. It would have been interesting to see what satirical image we saw when it comes to other Oriental partners, such as the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was experiencing turmoil at that time. And it led to a social explosion and to the revolution of 1904. Besides, I don't think it was the right solution to include satirical graphics inside the text in the dissertation. I suppose you should have put the images in the appendix to the dissertation. Although it is quite convenient for readers, however, I believe you should have put the images in the appendix, because this is a dissertation and there are some formal requirements to dissertations. So probably you should have added a specific, should have added an appendix with the images. However, the critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation, but I believe you should take them into account when you are working on the monograph based on the dissertation. As far as I understand, you are planning to write a monograph. I think your monograph will be interesting, and I suppose it will be interesting both for Russian and Chinese scholars. And I suppose this monograph could even be published both in Russia and in China. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian relations in 1894-1905 and their reflection in Russian satirical graphics, complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order issued by St. Petersburg State University. On the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of Historical Sciences, Scientific Specialty 562 General History. The dissertation is compliant with sections 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order. Thank you very much. Please answer the questions. Thank you for your report. would like to say that I'm sorry for the misprints in the dissertation. You recommended comparing satirical graphics with the satirical graphic of the Ottoman Empire. However, the majority of these satirical graphics appeared after 1905. These satirical graphics compared the Russian Revolution and the Turkish Revolution. So it was not within the scope of my dissertation. Besides, our colleague from the Institute of the Russian History, Professor Filipova, has written a number of monographs about satirical graphics about the Ottoman Empire. However, when I am writing my monograph, I will include this material in it. The National Library of Russia and the Library of the Academy of Science have lots of materials, and I will use them when I'm writing my monograph. You also said that I should have included the images, the caricatures in the appendix. This issue was discussed at the department, and the experts who read my dissertation recommended that I should leave these images in the text of the dissertation. And I would like to say that similar works tend to include the caricatures in the text because it makes more convenient for the reader. Thank you very much. I give the floor to our next speaker. The floor is given to Professor Starovoitova. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear guests, dear colleagues, I would like to omit some parts of my report because it is posted on the official website of St. Petersburg State University, and I would like to focus on the most relevant parts of my report. I would like to start with a remark. I like it when the caricatures are in the text of the dissertation, since it's not convenient to look at the caricature which is in the appendix. So I think it was the right decision to include the caricatures in the text of the dissertation and not in the appendix. I would like to say that the topic of the dissertation and the methods are well chosen. I could talk at length about it, and I have written about it in my report. I would like to reiterate again that the topic of the dissertation is relevant. However, I would like to say that you probably should have paid attention to some other issues. For example, you mentioned that even the journalists knew a lot about Chinese traditional costume, Chinese food, and so on. This proves an increased interest to China among Russian people, and I suppose this is a very important point. And this fact should not be taken for granted. Some details that we see on in these satirical graphics, such as costumes and utensils, show that people were not really good at drawing, but they knew a lot about Chinese culture. And now we see drawings to Chinese books, and I almost get a heart attack when I see these drawings. How can you publish a big book about China and include such drawings? And here we see satirical graphics which show that journalists knew a lot about China. And I would like to emphasize this. I'm not going to repeat what my colleague has already said. However, section 1.3 of the dissertation is really interesting. It is well written. It is very detailed. Section 3.2 is also very interesting, and it makes the dissertation well balanced. There are some stylistic inaccuracies. Sometimes these sentences are quite long. One of the problems was the inflow of Chinese migrants which became active at the end of the 19th century after the development of the region. So it's unclear here what became active. Another quotation. The German Michel is using his things to monitor the Chinese person, so it's impossible to say what is the object and what is the subject here. Well, now a few words about my critical remarks. I suppose you should have made the dissertation more balanced. You start analyzing caricatures on page 63. However, starting from section 2.2, we see a more balanced text of the dissertation. So when you're writing a monograph, please take this into account. Number 2, I suppose you should have spoken about the authors of the caricatures. This would allow you to show the evolution of ideas and the evolution of and the creative evolution of caricaturists. And I suppose you should have provided a more balanced reference list. You included both hieroglyphs and the names of the authors are not written in hieroglyphs, so it's sort of difficult to read the dissertation. And there are some also misprints in the list of reference. However, the critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova is a complete and comprehensive research which has scientific novelty. The topic of the dissertation makes contribution to history, to politology and to political studies, and to some other scientific areas which study Russian-Chinese relations at the turn of the 20th century. The dissertation is well written, the research findings are credible. So the dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian relations in 1894-1905 and their reflection in Russian satirical graphics comply with the major requirements set forth in the Order on the Procedure of Granting Academic Degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the Candidate of Historical Sciences, Scientific Specialty 562, General History. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Elena Starovoitova. Thank you very much. Yes, I know I sometimes have difficulties with long sentences. I know some of them are sometimes ambiguous. I will edit them. We discussed the structure of the dissertation with my dissertation supervisor. And I decided to provide the historical background so that the dissertation complies with the scientific specialty. And it was necessary to provide this academic, this historical background for readers who are not experts in this topic. I would say I agree that it would have been interesting to identify the authors of the satirical graphics, but unfortunately it's impossible to identify the author of satirical graphics. Some of them were not signed by the authors. This, for example, refers to the magazine Alarm Clock. Some of them are written by pseudonyms. For example, there was an author who signed the pseudonym Zop. However, I would like to say that Russian caricaturists reflected the public sentiments and the stance of the magazine. So I believe that it would have been interesting anyway to identify the authors of the caricatures. Yes, you also mentioned the reference list. When I was writing papers, I sort of forgot about how to correctly write the reference list because there are different requirements in different journals. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the next member of the Dissertation Council. I give the floor to Professor Blagoder. The topic of the dissertation is relevant. There are lots of papers which are devoted to Russian-Chinese relations and to the image of China. However, we see an increased interest to China among Russians, and the relevance will continue to increase. I have been studying the image of China in Russian periodicals for many years, and I would like to say that Elena Starovoitova has done a very good job. And it is very important for me that China and the so-called Chinese question is covered by scholars, and in many cases they use satirical graphics as their sources. And Elena Starovoitova makes an important contribution to science, namely the studies of periodicals. And I am sure that many scientists, many scholars will continue the research. And it is possible to continue the research. You can take other historical periods, you can refer to other periodicals, and so on. She uses satirical graphics because they appealed to mass reader. Why is it so important and so interesting? It gives us an opportunity to reconstruct the perception of the mass reader, not the perception of the elite. So we see the perception about China and about Russia, which was common among the general public. The dissertation produces a very positive impression. It provides a detailed historical background. And I understand why we see the first caricature on page 63. The first chapter is devoted to the historical background. And the first section describes the epoch, describes the time period. That is why it is quite clear to me why the first caricature appears on page 63. Now a few words about my critical remarks. There are some awkward wordings or phrases that lack arguments. So Russia was following its neighbor with continuous attention. Constant presence of Russia on the pages of Chinese periodicals. China became the constant hero of the periodicals. I am not going to read all of them. So I would like to say that there were no regular periodicals about China, and they made up a small proportion of all the periodicals. Russian-Chinese war is mentioned almost in every issue of the alarm text of the magazines The Alarm Clock and The Dragonfly. However, you include only 16 issues which were published over the 5 years, and these were annual magazine, or rather these were weekly magazines. I think you should have included the names of the satirical periodicals, because you did not analyze all the periodicals. The dissertation provides little information about the periodicals. I think you should have included the number of issues which were published, to provide information about the subscription. This would allow us to see the coverage. So it is important to include information about the readers, were they provincial readers or readers from St. Petersburg or Moscow. Did the satirical periodicals appeal to different public groups, and so on. Elena Olegovna Starovoitova uses lots of sources in her dissertation. However, some works published by public officials are historical sources. You shouldn't have described them in the section prior research of the topic. They did not study, they just described. And I suppose you should have drawn upon the works by Korostovets and his work Chinese and Their Civilization, which was published in St. Petersburg in 1896. So the dissertation makes an important contribution to the studies of Russian-Chinese relations, and the critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian Relations in 1894-1905, and their reflection in Russian satirical graphics comply with the major requirements set forth in the Order on the Procedure of Granting Academic Degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the Candidate of Historical Sciences.
Специальности 5, 6, 2.
The dissertation is compliant with sections 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order. Thank you. Thank you very much for your report. I give the floor to Elena Starovoitova. Thank you very much for your report. I know you're a great expert on the topic. You have studied a lot of periodicals, a lot of Russian periodicals about China, and I was glad to hear that I was able to make a contribution to this topic. Yes, I know there are some inaccuracies in my dissertation. I have been writing my dissertation for a number of years. I would like to say that I did not mean that Russian, or rather Chinese-Japanese war was described in every issue, but these events were mentioned almost in every issue of the magazine. I looked through different periodicals. I looked through all the periodicals that I found in the National Library of Russia. Most of the periodicals were established in 1860s, 1870s, and this was due to the technical possibilities. It became possible to put a caricature in the text. I chose the alarm clock and the dragonfly because they had the largest amount of caricatures. So I can say that those were the only periodicals which focus on China. There's a caricature from another periodical in my dissertation. For example, Professor Filipova, who writes about Ottoman and Japanese caricatures, as well as other scholars, say that the dragonfly, the alarm clock, and a couple of others periodicals were the leading satirical periodicals in the Russian Empire. They published thousands of issues, between 2,000 and 4,000 issues. When it comes to the alarm clock, the Dragonfly published about 8,000 or 9,000 issues. So the coverage was quite big, and there were subscriptions to these periodicals, and they covered readers in different regions of Russia because the circulation was so big. Besides, I would like to say that the readers were from different areas of Russia. So we can say that these periodicals reflected the perceptions of the general public. You also asked me about regional periodicals. Before 1905, there were no famous satirical periodicals in the Russian Empire because it was very expensive to publish such periodicals. So regional publishers couldn't afford it. They probably appeared lately. For example, there were periodicals, satirical periodicals in Harbin, publishing houses, but they probably appeared later. Well, this is a topic for my future research. And I suppose I can continue my research. Thank you very much. Thank you. I give the floor to the next member of the Dissertation Council. I give the floor to Professor Berezkin. I hope you can hear me. Yes, we can hear you and see you. I'm very glad to be a member of the Dissertation Council and to participate in the discussion. I'll try to be brief. A lot has been said today about the relevance of the dissertation and about its contribution to the studies of Russian-Chinese relations. The dissertation draws upon lots of sources and lots of scholarly papers. The dissertation also provides an innovative approach to studying the image of China in satirical periodicals. So I would like to focus on the critical remarks. Well, first of all, you do not explain why you chose a particular caricature for your dissertation. The structure of the analysis is not always homogeneous. You provide a more detailed analysis of some caricatures and a short analysis of other caricatures. You probably should have provided an analysis which is based on the theory of art. My colleagues have already mentioned that the dissertation lacks comparative analysis, namely the comparison between periodicals published in different countries. This comparative analysis would have allowed you to identify salient features of Russian satirical periodicals. Western periodicals were quite known in Russia in those times. There are some stylistic inaccuracies and misprints in the dissertation. However, the critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. And the dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian Relations in 1894-1905, and their reflection in Russian satirical graphics, complies with the major requirements set forth in the order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of historical sciences. The dissertation is compliant with sections 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order. Thank you. Thank you very much for your report. I give the floor to Elena Starovoitova. Thank you very much for your report. A few words about why I chose specific caricatures. I have looked through lots of periodicals and I copied all the caricatures, and then I included in the dissertation only the caricatures which allowed me to make the dissertation balanced. There were fewer caricatures describing Chinese-Japanese war, so I thought it would be wrong to give more caricatures about the Boxer rebellion. In this case, the dissertation would have been unbalanced, so I decided to include a similar number of caricatures. Moreover, I didn't want to repeat the caricatures. I thought it would be the right thing to do. This is how I chose the caricatures. Now a few words about the structure of analysis. I wanted to make the dissertation balanced, so sometimes the analysis is longer, sometimes it's shorter. You also asked me about the comparative analysis. I agree with this critical remark. Well, in general, it would have been really interesting to conduct such a comparative analysis, and I am planning to do this in the future. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Now I would like to read out my report. I'm going to focus on the most relevant parts of the report. The main advantage of the dissertation is the fact that it provides a comprehensive analysis of historical and geographical processes which had an impact on satirical periodicals in Russia at the turn of the 20th century. Well, I suppose you could have accompanied each of the sections with conclusions. This would allow you to describe the dynamics. The dissertation is credible and valid, and you provide rationale for your research findings. The research findings to be defended also look logical and credible. However, if you compare them with the tasks, you will see that the last two tasks, which we find in the dissertation, I would like to say that we see here that you have not included these tasks in the research findings for the defense. However, the text of the dissertation allows you to describe these tasks and how you solved these tasks as well. So I suppose you can conduct a comparative analysis in the future and describe geopolitical turmoil in the Far East. The dissertation by Elena Starovoitova, Sino-Russian Relations in 1894-1905, and their reflection in the Russian satirical graphics, complies with the major requirement on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And Elena Starovoitova can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of historical sciences. The dissertation is compliant with sections 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order. I would like to say that I agree with your critical remarks. However, you said that I should have provided conclusions after each section. I have been writing my dissertation for many years, so I sort of disregarded this issue, but thank you for the recommendation. The same refers to the comparative analysis. I suppose a comparative analysis will be really interesting. I would like to continue my research, and I would like to thank you for your suggestions. Is everybody satisfied with the answers provided by the academic degree seeker? I would like to ask the members of the audience if they would like to make a presentation or to ask something. Are there any questions on the website? Have we received any questions by email? I would like to give the floor to the dissertation supervisor. Please tell us about the academic degree seeker and their work. I'm not going to read out my report as it is published on the website. I would like to say a few words about the academic degree seeker. Elena Starovoitova is a distinguished researcher. She has been working on the dissertation for many years. However, she participated in different research projects. The project was supported by the scientific funds, and we published a monograph. It is not the only project in which Elena Starovoitova participated, and she has been participating in research projects since she was a student. When she was a second-year student, she conducted her research in the archive, and the employees of the archive spoke highly about her as a student. And now we see the results of her research. She has published a number of papers in leading journals. She published her papers in various journals. So I would like to say that she's a researcher already. However, I would like to say that the members of the Dissertation Council are to assess the results of her long research work. Do members of the Dissertation Council or do the members of the audience want to say something? So that is the end of the academic discussion. Now I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council and the academic degree seeker if they have any questions about the procedure. If they have any questions about the defense procedure. So each of you is supposed to give an answer. I don't have any objections. I don't have any objections. No objections. I don't have any objections either. Now let us move on to the next item on the agenda. This is open voting. We can have a technical break to discuss the results of the defense. Do you think we need such a technical break? So we don't need a technical break. Now let us continue. I will be asking each member of the Dissertation Council to voice their opinion. It's 5:45 by my watch. It's 5:45 Moscow time. We're beginning the open voting on the issue of conferring the academic degree of the candidate of Historical Sciences, Scientific Specialty 562, General History. It is emphasized that by voting in favor, each member of the Dissertation Council states that item 11 of the order has not been violated. Here I quote: "The academic degree seeker shall make references to the sources that have been used to write the dissertation. If the academic degree seeker used the research findings obtained by the degree seeker themselves or in collaboration, the academic degree seeker shall point this out." Let me remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Council is positive provided more than 50% of the Council members have voted in favor, in conformity with Section 23 of the Order. Professor Dyakov, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree to Elena Starovoitova. Thank you. Professor Starozhuk, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. Professor Blagoder, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. Professor Berezkin, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. Thank you. I'm the chairperson of the Dissertation Council. I also vote in favor of conferring the academic degree to Elena Starovoitova. So these are the results of the voting. So, out of 5 members of the Dissertation Council, 5 members have voted in favor of conferring the academic degree. Nobody has voted against or abstained from voting. So we confer the academic degree of the candidate of Historical Sciences to Elena Starovoitova. Ms. Starovoitova, you are given the floor. I would thank the members of the Dissertation Council, and I would like to thank my colleagues. A very important stage of my research has been completed. I would like to thank my university and everybody. That would be all. Thank you very much. I would like to congratulate you on the successful defense. That is the end of the Dissertation Council. Thank you very much. Please switch off the broadcast. Thank you very much for coming here, or rather for participating online in the session of the Dissertation Council.